As we move into Module 8, Lesson 3, last lesson we talked about slavery and abolition. This module is looking at the role of women in America after the Second Great Awakening and the changes that these women were capable of bringing about and changes that women experienced as a result of the Second Great Awakening. Now, before this existed, we need to know what life was like for women. And in a word, it was bad. It was bad. And it kind of stays bad for quite some time. So in the early 19th century, the early 1800s, the United States had pretty limited options, not just for women, but for a lot of Americans. But the prevailing belief was that women were inferior to men. Do you guys know what the word inferior means? That would be superior.
Like
lesser than. Now, obviously, we all know that's false. We know that men and women are just the same. Okay, we're all snowflakes, we're different. But we are all capable of great things and should be treated equally. That was not always the prevailing belief in American society. Tradition demanded that women restrict their activities to the home and to the family, housework, childcare. Those were the only activities that were considered proper for married women. If you were married and had to go to work, you were, sinful. Shame on you. Your husband must be a loser. That's kind of how it was thought and how it was seen as. And so this idea that women should maintain that the only place, now these pictures are very modern. Okay, this is not 1820s. There's no refrigerator, right? This idea that women should stay in the home, take care of their children, and maintain, play house, is called the cult of domesticity. That is the term that we refer to it as. Now, is there literally like a cult with a cult leader and women are walking around like zombies and cleaning houses and cooking? No, that's not what is meant by this cult, okay? But a cult is something that is, it's kind of brainwashing, right? Women were kind of meant to believe that they were inferior to men and that the only thing that they could do is take care of children and work in the home. That was the prevailing belief, especially among married women. Single women, yeah, you could work, but once you got married, you stay at home, all right? That is the cult of domesticity. So, during the Industrial Revolution, many young, unmarried women began to take factory jobs. And by the middle of the 19th century, by 1850, about 1 in 5 married women spent a few years working before they were married. So 20% of the married population in the United States, women knew what it was like to work because they had a job in a factory. And factory owners loved to employ women. Why? They could pay them less to do the exact same work as a man. But they could pay them less. Why could they pay them less for doing the same work? Because they're women.
But did they always pay less?
Yeah.
Did the women know they were getting paid less?
Yes. Doesn't compute in our brains, does it? Cult of domesticity. You were brainwashed to think you are inferior, ladies. You are not. You are women. Hear you roar, right? Okay? So, but women began working. Single women. Even during this time, married women is still looked down upon to have a job. So, and as married women, about these women that were working, they received roughly half the pay. Half the pay. Not 70%, half. Sophie.
Isn't there still a wage gap though?
Yes, like 79%, without a doubt. So it's not great, but it's better than half. Anyway, you're right. There's still a wage gap. So, as more and more women began entering the workforce, there was some pushback against it due to that cult of domesticity, where many people began to be speaking out about, how industrialization was threatening family life. How would industrialization threaten family life? Because what were women doing? They were working, having independence. They weren't making a lot of money, but they were making enough money to support themselves. And they could stay unmarried. And so as a result of women not getting married, they were not doing what? Having children. And so that was a threat to American family life. So many people spoke out against it. So Americans began to cling tighter to the notion that a woman's place was in the home. So it's kind of like a roller coaster. Like, hey, it's okay for single women to work and things are good. Wait a minute, these single women aren't coming back and getting married, so we've got to tighten up our regulations and keep the cult of domesticity going. And then this crisis happens, and we got a bunch of men going off to kill each other. We need a bunch of women to work in the factory. Oh, war's over. You women get back in the home and pop out babies and take care. Oh, and then you see the roller coaster that women are on? Okay? So, and the restrictions on women, they also had no rights, couldn't vote. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about like the hospitals and stuff. Like, did they get paid as much as the men in the hospitals?
Half.
Really? But they still do that to this day. Men get
There is definitely a wage gap between men and women in America. Yeah. Okay? All right, so got this? Like, it's not good. That's the general gist here, okay? It's not good. Not good. All right. Some women want to try to but want to fight for their rights. And they believe the best way to do this is to fight for the rights of others first. And there are many women abolitionists. Yeah, women have rights, but neither do slaves. And women abolitionists like these two ladies, who are sisters, Sarah and Angelina Grimke. Sarah and Angelina Grimke. Daughters of a South Carolina slaveholder, by the way. These are Southern belles right here. They spoke very eloquently for the abolition of slavery. They grew up on a plantation where their dad owned a lot of slaves. And they witnessed the horrors of slavery firsthand. The whippings, the beatings, the floggings, the murders. You could kill your own property and it's not murder. That's how they witnessed these types of things firsthand. And they published a book about the things that they saw. And they called it An Appeal to the Christian Women of the South in 1836. Where they called upon, it was a book written for women, where they called for women to be opposed to this horrible system of oppression and cruelty that we call slavery. And they did also other things like raise money, distribute literature, write petitions to Congress, all in favor of abolishing slavery. In fact, word even reaches people in the North about these women's efforts. Can you name a white radical abolitionist from the North who would be interested in hearing what these ladies have to say? Maybe one that wrote a newspaper called The Liberator? Say it again? William Lloyd Garrison. He catches wind of these two ladies' efforts, and he joined up with them. And William Lloyd Garrison and Sarah and Angela Grimke joined forces in their society called the Anti-Slavery Society. And abolitionism was not the only reform effort that women were at the forefront of. And a lot of this is because they believe, hey, if we can get slavery abolished, if black people can be free, it's just a matter of time before women can be free. So that's their thought here, okay? But abolitionism is not the only thing that they were active in. They were also active in the temperance movement. The temperance movement. Many women became active in the temperance movement. What is the temperance movement? The effort to prohibit or limit the consumption of alcohol. Why would women tend to favor the temperance movement more than men?
So they wouldn't get beat, maybe.
Typically, it's not the women coming home drunk from work and beating up their husbands. It's the husbands coming home drunk from work and beating up their women. And so temperance activists believed that excessive drinking brought out the worst in people, which it does. And so, I mean to tell you, you think people drink a lot today. In the 1820s, 30s, and 40s, they drank way more. They were drinking a lot more. Alcohol was flowing freely. A lot of it was due to the diets of many Americans. There was no refrigeration, so you ate a lot of salted meat, salted pork. You just wash it down with whatever you could get, and there was no refrigeration techniques, and sanitation was bad, and so there's no, beer is, fermented and then brewed, and so you boil it, so therefore you're not going to die of dysentery from drinking beer, and then liquor was, distilled, so people would wash down this nasty food with whatever they could get their hands on to swill down. So drunkenness, needless to say, became a very serious problem in the United States. What were you going to say? Somebody ask a question?
Oh, when was the refrigerator made?
I don't know. The ice box may have been around where you put a big block of ice in the top, and then since hot air rises, the cold air would come down and keep things cool, but that was very much of a luxury, especially in the South.
In the 1900s?
I'd say, I don't know. Ask the Oracle. Siri. Yeah. All right. So, the American Temperance Society was definitely something that many women could get behind. And in fact, about 6,000 of these societies against the consumption of alcohol existed. And, they had a pretty logical platform. They talked about the evils of alcohol, blaming liquor for sickness and poverty and domestic violence and breaking up families. And for many families, they could definitely point to the consumption of alcohol and alcoholism as the factors for that. Okay? Now, their ultimate goal was to get alcohol completely banned, and they're not successful with that at first, but eventually, in the 1900s, we do pass an amendment to prohibit alcohol, and the temperance movement becomes successful. But initially, it is not. So,
then how did we get alcohol back?
We repeal it with the 21st Amendment. 1899, the first refrigerator. So probably wide scale, the 1930s. Yeah, just like television. It's a luxury, and now everybody's got one. Okay? All right, so another effort they try to get it going, kind of peters out. Women still struggling. You see a theme here. Education for women. Until the 1820s, girls had very few educational opportunities. The Grimke sisters opened up a school just for girls. As many men trying to promote the idea of the cult of domesticity, they said women don't need education. Their feeble minds can't handle things like math and science and politics. In fact, if they learn those things, it'll make them a bad mother. Yeah, that's what they said. One man is quoted as saying that A woman needs to know enough chemistry to keep a pot boiling. Messed up, huh, ladies? Enough geography to know the layout of the rooms in her house. Don't you just want to pummel their faces? I do. Needless to say, women are facing an uphill battle when it comes to education. Forget about it if you're a black woman. You don't have a chance. They had it even worse. But white women could do some things like through the church, join a seminary, become a nun. Mount Holyoke is a female seminary in Massachusetts. There's also Oberlin College, which was founded in Ohio. It still exists today. It's an all-girls school. You can still go there. But as far as co-educational colleges, like WVU, where boys and girls go to the same school, that did not exist. That was not something that was very
How
common.
long did all-girls colleges last?
There still exists. You can go to. There's still all-girls colleges. There's all-boys colleges.
My aunt went to all-girls college.
Did she?
She went to Queens College.
Queens College.
It was called Queens College, but it was in Charlotte.
Okay, Charlotte's the Queen City. Huh. Okay, cool. Yeah, there's all girls, all boys. There's all black. There's all kinds of different collegiate things. Well, historically black colleges. Okay, so more struggle. Seeing a theme is emerging. Struggle. All right. When it comes to women and health, not too great, but there is hope for some women. As this lady right here, her name's Elizabeth Blackwell. She becomes the first woman in America to become a doctor, a medical doctor. She's the first woman to graduate from medical school in the United States. She does it in 1849. 1849.
Oh.
Elizabeth Blackwell becomes the first female doctor. First female to graduate from medical school. Yes, Sophie.
Did they accept her as a joke too?
I believe so. Just to kind of poke fun of her. But that's why she's in history books, because she didn't let it happen. She didn't let it bother her. She stuck to it, and she took it seriously. And eventually, they took her a little serious because they gave her the diploma. And she's the first female doctor. So she's kind of an American hero, Elizabeth Blackwell. As are these other ladies, Catherine Beecher and Amelia Bloomer. Catherine she's kind of like, her dad was the one that was really popular. Her dad was Lyman Beecher. He was the most popular, famous preacher in America. So she's kind of riding on his coattails. But she used that fame to undertake a national survey of women's health. She literally used her dad's fame and fortune and money and toured the United States, going from place to place, town to town, city to city, and did a survey of women's health to try to kind of get a gauge on how women were doing in health, like how their health was in the United States. Beecher's findings were sad. There were more sick women in the United States than there were healthy ones. 3-1. For every 3 sick women, there was 1 healthy one. And it was no wonder. Women rarely bathed. Women rarely exercised. The fashion of the day included corsets, which were so restrictive that breathing was sometimes difficult. The diets were bad. Often you just ate the same foods all the time. So it's not a surprise that women's health was so poor. And she publishes this, and it makes it known. Something needs to be done. Amelia Bloomer, what's she known for? Her underwear. You ever heard your bloomers? Mom ever said put your bloomers on or something? It comes from her, okay? Because she refused to conform to the fashion of the day, and she wore pants. Now, they bloomed out around her knees. But her name was Bloomer, and so whenever a woman wore pants, they were called bloomers. Named after Amelia Bloomer because she wore those. She was actually the publisher of a temperance newspaper. So she was a woman of influence as well. But like she called it a costume, like she's dressing up. Like this is not. She knew that this was out of the norm. But her costume consisted of loose-fitting pants that tied around the ankles, and she wore a skirt over it, which became extremely popular because she took pictures of herself and put them in her newspaper, and women loved the way it looked, and it was comfortable. You're just wearing pants, loose-fitting pants. Who doesn't like to wear sweatpants, right? So women began to sew these bloomers. That's what they called them, bloomers. They were considered a pretty daring venture as women, these women were wearing pants. How did men feel about that? Outraged. You go put your dress and your corset back on. Immediately. And while you're doing that, while you're wearing this corset, you can't breathe, go take care of the 7 children and make something to eat. That was the cult trying to continue and prevail the cult of domesticity. So you see men and women clashing, continually clashing. Eventually, women begin to organize. And a meeting happens in 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York. That meeting is called the Seneca Falls Convention. At this meeting, 2 famous women, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, they meet along with other women, and they discuss an agenda where they talk about the grievances that they have as women. Why is it so tough? Why are things so much harder for women? And that's what they met and they talked about. And they carefully crafted a statement which is called the Declaration of Sentiments. The Declaration of Sentiments. And it is based on the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all
Men and women are equal.
Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence says that all men are created equal. What do you think the Declaration of Sentiments says?
All men.
All men and women are created equal. So it's loosely based on the Declaration of Independence that proclaims the equality of all people. What about black people? Do they include them? They do. They do, because these are women and they're also going to fight for the equality and abolition. They did this in 1848. Pretty far advanced thinking ladies. Nearly 300 women joined at this convention, which took place at the Wesleyan Methodist Church in Seneca Falls, New York. And their ultimate goal, the ultimate aim that they wanted, was the right to vote. And they claimed that they want this right in 1848. Did they get it immediately? No. When do women get the right to vote? Nice and loud? 1920. Last year was the 100-year anniversary of women voting in the United States. All right? This is 1848 they're asking for it. These women never get to vote. But they begin the process. They get the ball rolling for future women to be able to have the right to vote. Okay? So the Seneca Falls Convention isn't important. And they get other people on their side. They get people like Frederick Douglass, the famous abolitionist, the great public speaker. He spoke eloquently about women getting the right to vote. The right to vote is also known as suffrage. Suffrage, okay? So, it become a long battle, a 70-year-long battle for these women to get the right to vote, but they ultimately get it with the 19th Amendment in 1920. Okay? This lady was also very influential in her day. Her name is Isabella Baumfree. We know her better as Sojourner Truth. She made up that name, Sojourner Truth, because she's on a journey for honesty, Sojourner Truth, to tell the truth. But her real name, her slave name, was Isabella Baumfree. And she's a female reformer that made significant contributions to improving life for women. She was a slave for the first 30 years of her life. Spent 30 years as a slave. And she took the name Sojourner Truth when she decided to travel throughout the country speaking the truth about abolition and the need to abolish slavery and the horrors of slavery, speaking truth about it. And she did it in a very smack of the pulpit, kind of like a preacher, okay? Emotional. Big, tall, muscular lady. Supported abolition, obviously. But very, very eloquent in her speaking style.
So she was a good speaker.
Very good speaker.
Was she educated?
No. Neither was Frederick Douglass. These people are all self-educated. Her power was in her emotion. Frederick Douglass's was more in his like he was brilliant. Like you would not know he was a slave. Like
Was
he
she
was
born into slavery?
for 30 years.
So she was born English, like she spoke English.
Yes. She was born in America to slave parents. Born a slave. Yes. Okay. Yet very like she couldn't read. She was illiterate. Like from but she was a very hardworking lady. Very spiritual woman. And there's a little excerpt about biography about her in your text. But questions about the ladies and I know we didn't solve any of these problems in today, but eventually that's kind of the journey that women are on in America to improve. Is the journey over? No, not until everybody has equality and is treated the same. It's a long journey. Okay? All right. Questions? All right. So